They said it was just an ink blot test. That's what Dr. Keller called it, a simple Rorschach just to see how your mind interprets shapes. His office smelled like coffee and antiseptic, that kind of fake cleanliness that hides something rotten underneath. The clock ticked slower than normal, and the hum of the lights sounded like whispers. He handed me the first card, 2 mirrored stains like a butterfly's shadow. But when I blinked, it moved. The black ink rippled, wet and alive, spreading outward like veins pulsing beneath the paper. "It's dripping," I said, my voice trembling. Dr. Keller smiled, eyes too calm. "Good," he whispered. "That means it's working." The ink crawled toward my fingers, shaping into something human. A face, my face, smiling wider than I ever could. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't testing how I see things. He was testing how far something inside the ink could see back. Subscribe if you're not afraid to look deeper, because some stains remember you. The paper was yellowed around the edges, and the ink stains were bleeding like old wounds as he slid the next one across the desk. Unlike the others, this one didn't appear random. It was shaped. 2 eyes that are hollow. A gaping mouth. Something wrong but human. The ink shimmered as if it were wet as I leaned in, and then it started to move. It's more akin to veins pulsing beneath translucent skin and spreading outward in slow, deliberate waves than dripping paint. I thought it was a trick of the light, so I blinked a lot, but the lines darkened, thickened, and gained texture and depth. Then the noise. The whispers were faint at first, like breath against the back of my neck. The paper started to breathe. Slow inhales and short, shaky exhales that matched my own heartbeat were audible to me until I was unable to distinguish which was mine. "What do you see?" Dr. Keller's calm, clinical, and almost humorous voice broke the stillness. As if he already knew, there was an odd curiosity in his tone. I tried to respond, but my throat constricted as I swallowed. Because the face, the ink, was moving once more. A low murmur escaped, impossible but genuine, and its lips twitched, their edges curling upward into a smile. "Say me." The voice came from the page, faint but distinct. The paper fluttered a little as I jerked back in my chair, but the sound became more distinct and urgent. "Say me." The eyes blinked hollow. They blinked, I promise. Keller remained motionless. Didn't recoil. His pen tapped rhythmically against his notepad as he continued to watch me with that same gentle smile. With my heart racing, I glanced up at him and noticed his reflection in the glass cabinet behind him. Keller's expression remained motionless. It wasn't his reflection. With too many teeth and a wider smile than a human could have, it was smiling. Even though Keller hadn't moved, the reflection cocked its head as its eyes met mine. With its lips hardly moving, the reflection whispered, "Do you see her too?" I shook and turned to face Keller. "Behind you," however, all he said was, "Good? She's picking you then." I turned to face the ink blot. The face had vanished. It was a mirror. From the paper, my reflection gazed up at me, but it had stopped blinking. When I attempted to turn my head away, my image in the paper whispered, "Say me, or she will," in perfect harmony with Keller's voice. I couldn't stop glancing at that reflection. Keller's reflection wasn't synced. It blinked too slowly and smiled too long. When he leaned forward, it stayed still. My throat went dry. I said, "Your mirror's cracked." He frowned. "There's no mirror behind me, Ethan." His voice was calm but too measured, like each word was rehearsed. I wanted to laugh, to break the tension, but something in my chest told me not to turn around. The air pressed heavier against my skin. I forced myself to look again. The reflection was gone. In its place, a faint, greasy handprint spread across the glass, dragging downward like melted wax. Keller didn't react. He just stared at me, pupils dilated, whispering, "Tell me what you see." My lips parted, nothing came out. Because the handprint wasn't behind him anymore. It was on my side of the window. I stepped back, pulse thundering in my ears. The smudge deepened, turning red at the edges, blood blooming beneath the glass like it was breathing. The office lights flickered, and the hum of the fluorescent bulbs stuttered in time with my heartbeat. "Who's there?" I managed to whisper. Keller smiled again, that same too-wide smile. "We're not alone," he said, his voice suddenly layered, two tones overlapping, his and another one I'd never heard before. I glanced down at the reflection again, two figures now, both smiling, both watching me. I stumbled back against the chair, knocking over his framed diploma. Behind the broken glass, my name was written across the certificate in dripping red letters. The whisper came next, right beside my ear, "Say me." My entire body locked. I turned sharply, but Keller was gone. His chair sat empty, spinning slowly, faintly creaking. My reflection in the window leaned closer, its eyes pitch black, its mouth opening wider, whispering faster, "Say me. Say me. Say me." I pressed my palms against my ears, screaming, but the sound wasn't leaving my throat, it was echoing from the window. I ran to the door, locked. I slammed my hands against the handle until my skin split, blood smearing across the cold metal. And from the corner of the room, I saw Keller standing behind me again. Not in the reflection, but in the real world this time, head tilted, his smile stretching too far, whispering in a dozen voices at once. "You've already said it, Ethan." The lights went out completely. Only the glass shimmered faintly, a dim pulse of red from behind the window. The handprint faded, replaced by a face. My own. Only this time, I was the one inside the glass, staring back at myself, pounding silently to get out. As though it had absorbed everything the room refused to recall, the third card was darker than the others, almost black. When Keller slid it toward me, his tone changed to one of almost reverence. "This one is unique," he muttered. "Explain your feelings to me." The paper was too warm, like feverish skin. After a moment of hesitation, I turned it upright. This time I didn't see ink. I could barely make out my outline. Reflected, not printed, not drawn. When I didn't, the card's shadow cocked its head. My heartbeat quickened. I could hear it thumping in my ears, growing louder with each breath. Then my sleeve was stained by a single drop of crimson that trickled from the upper corner of the page. I instinctively dropped it, thinking it would fall, but it didn't. Like something breathing, the card fluttered and pulsed as it hung in midair. Keller leaned in closer, his voice trembling and low, but not out of fear, but fascination. He whispered, "Keep looking, it sees you now." Twice the overhead lights flickered, and the card drew nearer during those fleeting blackouts. Every time the light came back, it got closer, until it hovered just inches away from my face, the black outline now muttering silently. Keller whispered, almost to himself, "You've opened it." The flickering light caused his eyes to glow dimly, and I saw something I couldn't have seen before. The same black veins that had been bleeding from the card were creeping up his neck. "What did you do?" I let out a gasp. He didn't respond though. Reflections of the same black figure multiplied on the walls behind him, shimmering like liquid. There were 10, 20, or even 100 of me, all of them staring and blinking just a second too late. I attempted to get up, but my chair felt like it was cemented to the ground. Keller's voice returned, layered with something inhuman and distorted. "You took too long a look. It has now committed itself to memory." Smoke rose from the card as it drifted down onto the table, curling at the edges. When I didn't, my reflection on the desk's glossy surface smiled. "Doctor." Breathing heavily, I whispered, "What is it?" The lights went out completely and he smiled, calmly, almost proudly. The voice reappeared in the darkness, this time from directly behind my ear rather than the card. "You noticed me. I'll now reveal your true appearance to you." Dr. Keller didn't even try to act like it was therapy by the next session. His office was colder, and the recording devices lining the walls made a low hum that filled the room. All the cameras had their red lights blinking, watching, judging, and waiting. He said, "You're the only one who can make them show up," his voice too calm and sure. He pushed a new stack of blank cards across the desk, and the latex gloves on his hands creaked like old skin. "Pay attention, Ethan. Keep looking until something looks back. The lights flickered once, then twice, and then they stayed on in a sickly yellow glow. I stared at the first card until my vision got blurry and white turned into gray and then into motion. Slowly, faint outlines of veins, eyes, and lips started to crawl across the page. But they weren't pictures. They were faces. My faces. There were dozens of screaming versions of me burned into the paper, with their mouths open in pain and blood running from their eyes like black ink come to life. I flinched back and gasped, but Keller's voice stayed calm. "They're coming up. Don't lose touch." The walls began to hum, a low, deep sound that felt like thunder shaking my head from far away. With each heartbeat, the air got thicker. I wanted to stop and look away, but my eyes wouldn't let me. The faces on the cards started to change. Some were older, some were younger, and all of them were me. One of them said softly, "We remember what you forgot." My breath caught. What did I leave out? I asked, my voice shaking. Keller leaned forward and shadows crossed his face. He said softly, "The first session wasn't the start. It was the return." I looked down again and the papers were gone from the desk. They were on the floor, the walls, the ceiling, every sheet covered in those bleeding faces, overlapping like flesh pressed against glass. And in every reflection of their glossy eyes, I could see him, Dr. Keller, standing behind me though he hadn't moved. His reflection smiled before he did. I stood up, but my knees buckled. The sound of paper tearing filled the room as if something was crawling out from underneath. Keller didn't flinch. He whispered like he was speaking to it, not to me. "It knows you now. You showed it who you are." I turned to the mirror behind his desk, and for a split second, I saw every face on those cards staring back from inside the glass, each one mouthing the same word in perfect unison. My name. My screen froze on that frame, the stitched mouth, those black eyes locked on mine. Then the monitor flickered and the image blinked. I yanked the plug from the wall, but the screen stayed on, glowing faintly, the face still there. My reflection appeared beside it, and for a moment we smiled at the same time. The next morning, Keller's office was empty. No furniture. No files. Not even dust. The walls were clean, too clean like they'd just been painted over. Only one thing remained, a mirror leaning against the wall, covered halfway by a sheet. My name was scratched across the glass. I pulled the sheet away. Inside the reflection, Keller stood behind me. His lips didn't move, but I heard his voice, soft and wet. "You finished the test." The lights cut out. When they came back, I was no longer in the office. I was sitting in the therapy chair again, only now cameras surrounded me, hundreds of them. All the lenses were moving, adjusting, and breathing. A deep humming filled the air, and every screen around the room showed me. Different versions, smiling, screaming, whispering to something I couldn't see. Then, from one of the monitors, Keller stepped out. His form peeled off the glass like liquid shadow. He stood there, taller, thinner, eyes dripping black. "You opened the channel," he said, his voice distorted and layered as if 1,000 people were speaking through him. I stumbled back. "Where is Clara?" I shouted. His grin widened. "Clara was your word. Your mind gave her shape. Now she doesn't need you to exist." I turned to the mirror, and there she was. Pale skin stretched too tight, hair floating like it was underwater. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out, only a vibration that made my teeth ache. Behind her, the reflections of every card I'd seen before hung in the air, each showing a new scene of me doing something I hadn't done yet. "Stop this!" I screamed, grabbing the nearest camera. It burst in my hand, bleeding thick, black ink that ran down my arm like oil. Keller watched, smiling. "You asked to remember," he said. "This is what remembering looks like." The humming became a roar. The faces on the monitors began merging, all my versions twisting into one screaming figure that pressed against the screen until the glass cracked. The power surged, lights exploded, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was home. Or at least it looked like home. But my apartment walls were covered in sketches. Every card, every shadow, every face. In the middle of them, one message was written in thick, dark strokes. "She's inside the mirror." I ran to the bathroom. The mirror was fogged, but there was something moving behind the reflection, like a shadow trapped between the glass and the world. I reached out and the surface pulsed under my fingertips. Then came her whisper from somewhere impossibly close. "You brought me back. Now finish what he started." The lights flickered. My reflection blinked, but I didn't. And for the first time I realized I wasn't the one outside anymore. The photo slipped from my fingers. It landed face down, but I could still feel something staring at me through the paper. The air in the office felt thicker now, like it was breathing with me. Somewhere in the walls, something moved, a soft dragging sound like fingernails against glass. I turned toward the desk. Keller's monitor was still on, flickering with static. Then a video file appeared on the screen by itself, Rorschach.log. My pulse hammered as I clicked play. The footage showed Keller in the same office the same night. He was sitting exactly where I am sitting now. "Subject shows advanced mirroring," he said, voice trembling. "Every time I erase him, he returns closer." He looked off camera, whispering, "He's learning." Then he held up a card. My card. The same one with the face that whispered, "Say me." But this time the ink didn't stay on the page. It spread across his hands, up his arms, crawling into his skin like veins made of shadow. Keller began screaming, but it wasn't fear. It sounded like he was splitting. His voice layered into two tones, one human, one deep and wrong. The feed glitched. And suddenly Keller's face on the screen turned toward me. Only now it wasn't Keller. It was me. He smiled. "Stop watching yourself." The screen went black. My reflection appeared in it instead, eyes pitch black, stitched mouth forming the same words. I stumbled back, slamming into the cabinet, and that's when the folders spilled out. Dozens of Polaroids fluttered through the air, spinning like dead leaves. For a split second, they all froze mid-fall, as if gravity itself hesitated, and in every photo my mouth began to move. "Integration complete," they whispered in perfect unison. I ran. The hallway seemed longer now, endless, bending in impossible angles. Each fluorescent light flickered as I passed beneath it, showing flashes of other versions of me, walking in reverse, whispering to walls, smiling. By the time I reached the exit, the door was gone. Just smooth concrete. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A new message blinked across the screen. "Do not leave the testing environment." My reflection stared at me from the dark glass of the phone. Then, without moving my own lips, it whispered, "He didn't die, you know. Keller's inside you now." The lights cut out. Something cold touched the back of my neck. A hand. But it wasn't solid. It felt like smoke pressed into flesh. I turned, and there he was, Dr. Keller, or whatever was left of him, stitched eyes weeping ink, mouth stretching too wide. "I told you," he said softly, "the Rorschach doesn't reveal what you see, it shows what's left of you." He pressed the card against my chest. I felt it burn through my shirt into my skin. Black veins spread outward, crawling toward my throat. I tried to scream, but the sound came out from his mouth. And then everything went still. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting in the therapy chair again. The office was bright and clean. Keller sat across from me, smiling gently. "You're making progress," he said. I looked at my hands. They were his. When I looked in the mirror that night, I saw blood under my fingernails. I hadn't noticed it before, blackened streaks tracing the curves of my fingertips like veins of ink. The face staring back at me smiled before I could even force one onto my own lips, its expression twisted, perfect, and knowing. I wiped at the mirror, desperate, but it didn't respond. The glass stayed alive, breathing faintly under my touch. Then it moved, just a fraction, slow and deliberate, and raised a card, the same Rorschach card I had seen countless times before, pressing it flat against the glass. The ink on the card began to shimmer, almost liquid, and then I realized with a sickening horror that blood was seeping from behind the reflection itself, dripping down the surface in thick, black rivulets. My stomach churned as I stepped back, but the floor beneath the mirror warped under each drop, creating pools that seemed to pulse like hearts. A faint, broken voice echoed around the room, faint but unmistakable. "Keller, you finished the test." It hissed, the sound vibrating in my chest rather than through my ears. My reflection tilted its head, eyes widening unnaturally, pupils black and cold as obsidian. I tried to look away, to close my eyes, to hide from it, but the mirror wouldn't let me. The card throbbed like a heartbeat, and each pulse sent a shiver of icy terror up my spine. Then, impossibly, the ink began crawling off the card, spreading across the reflection's hands and moving down the glass toward me. The blood behind it shifted with the ink, veins growing longer, reaching out like tendrils made of shadow and liquid. I stumbled back against the wall. The reflection leaned closer. Its lips moved in perfect unison with mine, whispering in a voice layered with mine and Keller's, "Now I'll grade it." The words slithered into my mind like a cold stream, twisting thought and fear until I couldn't tell where I ended and the reflection began. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in the quiet of the room. I raised my own hand instinctively, and it was met with the reflection pressing its hand against mine, through the glass, the card pressing firmly against my chest from the other side. The moment the two contacts met, an explosion of heat and cold tore through me, like ice and fire fused inside my veins. The mirror cracked with a deafening sound, but the reflection didn't shatter. Instead, it stepped forward, phasing impossibly out of the glass, smoke-like and solid at once. Blood continued to drip from the cracks behind it, spreading across the wall, the floor, and the air itself, thickening with iron and ink. The reflection's smile grew wider, unnatural, impossibly wide, stretching across its face. Its eyes bore into mine, and I could feel it pulling at something deep inside me. Memories, fear, identity, as though it was siphoning my very self into the card it held. I fell to my knees, gasping, clawing at the card, trying to separate it from my chest, but the ink veins had merged with my skin. The air around me throbbed with whispers, hundreds of voices overlapping, chanting words I didn't understand but felt deep in my bones. "Remember, integrate, obey." I screamed, but the sound came not from my mouth. It came from the reflections, echoing from every corner of the room, layered, distorted, and terrifying. The mirror pulsed violently. My reflection multiplied, appearing everywhere, on the walls, the ceiling, the windows, and even in the floor. All of them pressed the card against their surfaces, dripping blood, veins crawling like black fire toward me. The room itself seemed to fold inward, bending and stretching, a void filled with my own terror. My hands shook uncontrollably, every nerve in my body screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. Then the whispering stopped. Silence fell heavy, suffocating. My reflection, now standing inches from me, stared silently, breathing in sync with me. Its hand hovered over the card, waiting. I could see Keller's faint form behind it in the reflection, grinning, eyes hollow and stitched, a shadowed witness to my unraveling. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the reflection pressed the card against the glass with finality. Blood and ink poured from behind the surface, spreading across the mirror like living veins. And as it leaned in close, whispering directly into my mind, "You finished the test. Now, I'll grade it." The room went black. The bleeding wouldn't stop. Every night, no matter how much I scrubbed, new streaks of ink appeared across my walls, black veins crawling outward like living roots searching for air. They spread in patterns that made no sense at first, until they started forming shapes. Familiar ones. The butterfly from the first Rorschach test. My own face, distorted and half-melted. Ann Keller's smile, stretched, bleeding, burned into the plaster as if the building itself was remembering him. The smell of iron and rot had become part of the air. I stopped sleeping and stopped eating. Every sound became a whisper, every shadow seemed to hold a pulse. I began hearing scratching in the walls, faint at first, then rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then one morning I turned on the news. The screen flickered, static humming like a low growl, and there it was, breaking. Local psychiatrist found dead in his office. The photo appeared on screen. They said his name. Dr. Benjamin Keller. Self-inflicted wounds, the anchor read, tone flat and detached. A card clutched in his hand. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. The picture on the screen wasn't him. It was me. My face. Same scar on the jaw, same faint mole by the temple. My eyes were open, lifeless, and a Rorschach card was pinned to my chest, still dripping with black ink. The anchor's voice distorted mid-sentence, stretching, echoing. He finally passed the test. My chest tightened. I stumbled backward, knocking the remote to the floor. The screen didn't turn off. It flickered again, the static morphing into a smear of ink. A shape began forming on the glass, lines curling and shifting like living veins. And then, through the distortion, I saw movement, myself standing behind me in the reflection of the TV. My reflection was pale, bleeding from its eyes, smiling that same impossible smile Keller used to wear. I turned slowly, but the room was empty. Only the walls breathing, only the faint hum of something alive beneath the plaster. Then my phone vibrated, one single message. No number, no contact name. Just words, he's gone. It's your turn now. My heart dropped. I stared at the message until the letters began to blur. Then they rearranged themselves on their own, reshaping into something new. You finished the test. Now start the treatment. I threw the phone across the room. The screen shattered, but even through the spiderweb of cracks, the message glowed, pulsing like a heartbeat. I ran to the bathroom sink, splashing water on my face, whispering to myself, "It's not real. None of this is real." But when I looked up, the mirror was gone. Not shattered. Gone. Just a blank space, like it had been erased from existence. In its place, the tiles had darkened, soaked with ink. From the center, letters began forming, one after another, slowly spelling, "You're remembering." I pressed my hand to it, trembling. It was warm, too warm. Then, from deep inside the wall, a muffled voice whispered, "You're late for your session." My blood ran cold. The apartment lights flickered. Once, twice, and every surface reflected something now. The TV, the doorknob, even the wet floor. In each reflection, Keller was standing behind me. Different versions, some with his face missing, others grinning, others weeping black tears. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, and my hands smeared through the ink, revealing another message underneath. The Rorschach doesn't end. It transfers. The air turned thick, unbreathable. My ears rang and my vision swam. The news anchor's voice came back through the static, but it was my voice this time, reading my own obituary. I watched, frozen, as the photo on the screen changed again, me sitting right there, eyes wide, staring at the TV. The same moment, the same second. What? A faint smile crawled across my reflection's lips. It held the blood-soaked card up against the screen, pressing it gently to the glass. The ink began to drip again, slow and deliberate, like it was writing something new. The static hissed louder until the only sound left was Keller's voice, calm, patient, and echoing through the room. "Therapy is about trust. Now, let me in." They found me yesterday, crouched in the corner, mumbling to the dark that pulsed like a living thing. The officer said I'd painted art on every wall, twisting patterns, dripping symbols, symmetrical stains of red and black. They didn't understand. They weren't art. They weren't random. They were doors. Each blot, each mirrored stain was a gate, something trying to come through from the other side. I told them not to touch it. Don't take the test. But they laughed, the way people do when they don't feel the weight of what's in the room. One of them, a young cop with shaking hands, picked up a blood-soaked Rorschach card from the floor. He held it up under his flashlight, squinting. "What do you see?" he joked. The ink moved. It twitched like a heartbeat, spreading veins across the card, pulsing up his wrist. He dropped it, but too late. The stain had already mirrored itself on his palm, sinking under his skin. I screamed until my voice broke, but no one listened. They never do until it's inside them. They think the mind is a mirror, reflecting what's real. But Keller was right. The mirror isn't a reflection. It's a window, a passage. And once the ink finds you, once you stare long enough to see yourself inside it, remembers, they took me to a white room now, padded walls, no mirrors. But every night the lights flicker. The walls start to pulse again. I can smell iron. I can hear whispering from the corners, faint and wet. They call my name the same way Keller's voice did before he vanished. Sometimes I see movement in the reflection of the security glass, shapes forming like shadows underwater. Faces pressed against the surface trying to breathe through it. Sometimes I see mine among them. Last night I found a card under my bed. Blank. But when I held it under the light I could feel warmth, like skin, like it was waiting. So if anyone ever hands you a Rorschach card that feels warm, don't look at it, because sometimes the ink looks black. If anyone ever hands you a Rorschach card that feels warm, don't look at it, because sometimes the ink looks back.